get to that bright, big, beautiful tomorrow where safety, security, and a circular economy and zero waste and healthy future are firmly in place because of students like Lauren Fernandez, who's going to speak to you today. Lauren is one of those luminaries who came to our program, was in my climate change concentration and did fantastic work, and then has gone on to do exactly what we all believed she would, to make an impact in the world. So we're really proud to have Lauren back. Lauren is now a sustainability professional as a graduate from PCGS. She graduated in 2020 and earned her Master of Arts in Global Sustainability with that concentration, as I mentioned, in climate change adaptation and mitigation. Our Bachelor of Arts was actually in interdisciplinary social sciences with a concentration in international relations and Africana studies, Bachelor of Arts from the University of South Florida. So she is one of us through and through and has taken that through line now to the northern part of our country. She's now a zero waste policy analyst for the Conservation Law Foundation based in Boston, Massachusetts. That's got quite a history of social and revolutionary change, as we know. And Lauren is passionate about social change. Her areas of specialization are climate change and resiliency, zero waste and recycling, and waste policy. And she's advocating for research-based zero waste legislation at the state level through an environmental justice lens. And we're particularly proud of you for that, Lauren, because that justice is that missing piece that can make sustainability fully flourish. She's researched how communities would best be supported by and benefit from zero waste legislation. And she's collaborated with regional environmental organizations to advocate for zero waste legislation and working on educating the public. So welcome, Lauren. Once again, really glad to have you. You're an inspiration for our students and for us on the faculty and staff.
Well, thank you so much, TH. It's so great to see you. And thank you everyone for having me today. Apologies for, I'm thinking that you see the incorrect name. My name is not John. My name is Lauren Fernandez. I'm logged into my my partner's Teams account. He's a math teacher, so he's used Teams a lot to teach virtually over the past year and a half through the pandemic. But is it okay if I go ahead and just start sharing my screen then? Okay, absolutely. So apologies in advance, because like I mentioned, I don't know if anyone heard, I'm an older millennial. So I still remember when phones were attached to the wall. And so sometimes I'm not as quick with technology as like Gen Z is. But I'm gonna go ahead and start sharing my screen in a second so I can share my presentation with you all. Can you all see it? Okay. Yes? Okay. Can you see
not yet.
No? Okay, perfect. And all right. So what I want to talk about today is creating zero waste communities. So as TH mentioned, I was a student at the Patel College of Global Sustainability. I graduated last year in 2020, which that now feels like decades ago. And a big thing that I became passionate about, that I was already looking at before I began my graduate studies, was zero waste, but how to make this accessible to others. I focused my thesis on accessibility and privilege in the zero waste communities, and that really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And as TH mentioned, so I'm now I'm very grateful to work as a zero waste policy analyst, because that's exactly what I'm doing, is I'm helping create zero waste communities. And I'm really excited to share with all of you today about how I do that and what that means. So I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit. And I may be preaching to the choir, because I know that all of you are sustainability graduate students. And as you're aware, our world is in a waste crisis. And that's probably a big reason why you're in, why you decided to go back to graduate school, and to figure out how can you be part of solving this waste crisis that we're in. And understanding too, I know I'm sure many of you are partly taking or have already taken systems thinking as part of your graduate curriculum. But I think it's important to understand that we live in a world that's a system of systems. and that the waste crisis is very much part of the climate crisis. They have an overlap that one cannot exist without the other. Every time we produce goods, there's a water and energy impact on our earth. As a result of overconsumption and overproduction, we have overflowing landfills, we have incinerators burning, polluting communities, and often we find those disproportionately, and Black and Brown communities, low-income communities, are often the ones that have these landfills and incinerators and are being disproportionately affected in health and other in quality of life. We have to consider in our waste crisis, we have to think about particularly the production of plastics, which pollutes at every stage of its life cycle, from fracking plastic to get it out till its end, where it's likely to end up in a landfill after one use, or burn in an incinerator, ends up littering our waterways, our communities. So how do we address the waste crisis? It's not as simple as recycling. So every time someone says this, I think of this image of myself in 4th grade. I have a really clear memory of sitting there. I think it was like career day or something like that, where, a woman came in from a local recycling company and talked about how important it was for us as kids. We could be part of saving our community, and all we had to do was make sure to put recyclables in the right bin, and then we were doing the right job. And this is the narrative that so many people in the United States have been fed, and other countries around the world. We've been fed, as long as we just recycle, we're doing the right thing. And if we don't recycle enough, then that's our problem. But the truth is that we're not going to recycle our way out of the waste crisis. Only 9% of plastics have ever been recycled. And I also heard a recent statistic that the majority of plastics that have ever been produced were produced in about the last 15 years or so. So there's just been an overwhelming amount of plastics like being produced even at a faster rate than ever. We know we live in a single-use culture. The pandemic has exacerbated that, with people with fear of spreading COVID. We have seen that people really have turned back to disposables more than ever, because they think that that's safer and healthier, when actually that is causing more harm to us as humans and to our planet. So how do we shift out of this culture, this convenient culture that we have, especially in the United States and other Western countries? It's about changing our mindset. We need to shift away from this belief that recycling is the best that we can do. Some of you may be familiar with Bea Johnson. She is the woman who was able to reduce her waste down to, like, all of her garbage in a year was able to fit in a mason jar. And there's a few other people who are particularly white women. I think it's important to note that that's been the demographic who's really made a name for themselves, talking about their zero waste efforts on a individual level. And they talk about all these different things they do in their daily life, and they're like, I can get my garbage in a year, I can just fill up a mason jar and that's it. And I think that there is something great about that they are making these efforts. They're trying to build awareness, and inspire others to think about what they're consuming and what they're buying. But truthfully, this is not accessible or realistic to most people. It's not accessible to everyone of every race or ethnic group, or people of different, people with disabilities, people of different income backgrounds, people who don't have cars. There's a lot of different dynamics to think about, people who have children, people who are caregivers in different capacities. But again, I think what that narrative does is it continues to put pressure on us, that it's our individual responsibility to reduce waste. And we just, most of us just walk around feeling guilty because, we buy a plastic bottle of water, or we can't figure out how to recycle something, or we don't have recycling in our communities. So I think we have to think about why has this been an individual responsibility? So I think part of our shift, what we have to think about is, how do we create accessible and inclusive solutions? So this is where I want to share a little bit more about zero waste legislation that some of you may be familiar with and heard about. But I think that these are some really important things to look into and learn more about, because these are programs that are already being implemented in in many states around the United States and other countries around the world. So I'll start with the bottle bill. For any of you who may have heard of this, it's also known as a deposit return system. And the bottle bill is not something new. This has, been around, for decades in different forms. But essentially, what it does, it allows for a deposit or a small fee to be put on every container when it's bought. So say, for example, you go into Trader Joe's and you buy a 6-pack of craft cider, so all of those bottles would have, if you lived in a place like Michigan, all of those bottles would have a 10-cent deposit fee on them. And then, so that's incorporated into your bill when you check out. And then what you can do is when you go back to Trader Joe's next week to get your groceries, you would take all those glass bottles with you and you get your 60 cents back for that 6-pack of glass bottles. A lot of times grocery stores, states that have bottle bills and deposit return systems, they have something called a redemption center or a redemption machine that are usually inside of grocery stores. So you can just stick your bottles in there and you'll get your money back. And that has been, the bottle bill has been proven to increase recycling significantly. In states like Michigan that have a bottle bill with a 10-cent deposit fee on it, they see close to a 90% redemption rate, meaning that many of those bottles and containers are being recycled. And there's actually ways to track that now and to see that those are being recycled and reused. The second legislative piece I want to talk about is called extended producer responsibility. And there's a lot you can infer from that name from itself. But what it does essentially is it puts the responsibility back on the producer who made that product in the first place. So companies like Coca-Cola, Amazon, Publix, all these other companies, like everyone that we get our products from. So instead of us trying to figure out as individuals how to recycle something, especially when companies make something that's not recyclable, like chip bags or other products, it instead incentivizes companies to make their products more recyclable. Because companies are charged fees, so the more difficult it is to recycle packaging or other products that they have, then the more that company is going to have to pay. So you may know this now, but a lot of time, basically, who's paying for our recycling and waste systems now is our taxpayers. Cities and towns, they manage that. So instead of putting that burden on taxpayers and making cities and towns figure out how in the world are we going to budget, for recycling that continues to increase in cost and waste and, all these things, it instead is putting that responsibility back on the producer to say, hey, you need to create packaging, you need to create other products that are easy to recycle. And if you don't, we're going to charge you more money for that. And then the easier it is to recycle a product, then the less money that costs the company. So there's an incentive for the company to make more sustainable products and packaging. Another solution that I really like is single-use bans. I also want to acknowledge, as an able-bodied person, that these there's a lot of privilege in different single-use bans, particularly with straws. And I think that that's really important, that as we create single-use bans, that we consider, and then in any zero waste legislation, that we do consider leadership and voices of people with disabilities who are truly dependent on straws to drink liquids, to stay alive, and to think about that. But what's helpful in thinking about as we consider single-use bans is that most of the single-use items that are making the biggest impact right now are plastic bags and plastic bottles, plastic water bottles particularly. So I think, things like single-use bans on grocery bags. There's a lot of cities and states that have done that across the country and around the world. But this is a really good, accessible, inclusive solution, as the same with like a plastic water bottle ban. Something else that you all might be familiar with or may have heard about is the Break Free from Plastic Act, which is a national bill being considered right now, that has a lot of really important pieces in it, that would move our country away from our dependency on plastic. Just for time's sake, I'm not going to get too much into that, but it has a lot of really good pieces on that, like things like a national bottle bill, moving us away from, dependency on fossil fuels. So I would definitely encourage you to learn more about these kind of inclusive, accessible solutions of zero waste legislation. And as also to think global but act local. I know this is a common phrase that a lot of people have heard, especially in sustainability circles, but local level ordinances are powerful. They do make a difference. Think about how many people live in the city of Tampa now. I would say Hillsborough County is probably at least a couple million by now, maybe more. But to think about if there was a plastic grocery bag ban in Hillsborough County, Florida, that would wipe out millions and millions of plastic, bags that are being used every day at places like Publix and CVS. Just think about the way that would reduce a significant amount of waste just in that area, just in Florida. A lot of smaller cities and towns have done things like bans on single-use bottles, bags, styrofoam boxes, takeout containers, things like that. I don't think we also cannot underestimate community composting systems. Those seem to be becoming more and more common, usually as private businesses, but I think that's a really important piece, is that we have accessible systems where lots of people can participate in composting. Because right now, if you live in an apartment, if you don't have time, if you don't have a space to compost, or but being able to participate in a community composting system allows a place for people to get rid of their food scraps in a way that is sustainable, rather than those food scraps ending up in a landfill. I will say an important thing about to be aware of is of greenwash bans. This happens a lot in legislation like the bottle bill, or in like plastic bag bans. Unfortunately, now what something you've probably seen is there are really like thick like plastic bags that have like these stitch handles on them. Like Target is using those now, which is really unfortunate, because I really like Target, especially as a parent with a young child. Target drive up is really convenient, especially during the pandemic, when I want to avoid going around people and things like that. But a lot of times a lot of times bag bans are being worded as like, okay, we're just going to get rid of those like more flimsy, filmy plastic bags, but we're going to, still like have like these thicker plastic bags, because the argument is that those thicker plastic bags with the stitch handles can be reused up to 125 times. And while that is true, a lot of times people are not going to reuse those, and a lot of people are not going to bring those type of plastic bags back to a store for reuse. So it doesn't really incentivize people to reuse those plastic bags. And we're still just, producing a lot of plastic, a lot of single-use plastic at the end of the day. So we have to be really thoughtful as we put those bans together, to think about, is this something that's actually going to be really helpful, or is it actually, not going to make that big of a difference? But reuse is really our most sustainable choice at the end of the day. And I think that, what our mindset needs to be as we develop and create zero waste communities is we have to shift from single use to reuse. So there are things like local ordinances and regulations happening across the country, where people are working to, groups of residents are working to implement reuse systems, either through private businesses or through an ordinance. For example, I connected earlier this year with some colleagues in Los Angeles. with a group called Reusable LA, Reusable Los Angeles, and they implemented this really great campaign called Skip the Stuff, where now restaurants in Los Angeles are not required to just automatically give things like plasticware, but instead now they're encouraged to do things like reusable silverware, reusable containers and cups and other things. So these things are happening. There is a reuse, an awareness of the need for reuse shifting around the country. And like I said, reuse coalitions are forming. I'm actually working on that myself here in the Northeast, working to develop something called the Reusable New England Coalition. So working with other environmental activists and colleagues and concerned residents and business owners who are, we're working together just to try and implement larger scale reuse systems so that more people can participate. And it's not just something people are doing on an individual level. So I just wanted to show this really quick video to you. This is from Reusable LA. So I would just ask, just pay real close attention and see what you notice in the video. Okay. How do I get out of here? Sorry, remember I told you I'm an older millennial. Okay, how do I get back out to my, sorry about that. Why is it not letting me get out of full screen?
It's okay, we got your back.
Okay. Oh, here it is. I got it. Thank you. Some things that you might have noticed in there was that I think almost all the items of these things that are filling up things like coffee or juice or, fruit or all these other things, or the silverware that was handed to people, it was all reusable. And that's not the norm when you go to get takeout. So I thought that was really like significant to see, like, yeah, this is what we can create. Like, it doesn't just have to be in places like Los Angeles. Like, things like this can happen in places like Tampa and other cities across the country and around the world. Oh, geez, it's taking me. So I think I just want to emphasize again that we need to, when we think about zero waste communities, that we think about the root of the problem. And what we need to do is avoid creating waste in the first place. We already have so much in our world. Like, we have so many things that can be used secondhand, so many things that can be reused. And we have to think about, something like a glass bottle can be reused up to 1,000 times. Like, we have the technology to sanitize properly. Like, most times if you go sit in a nicer restaurant, you're reusing plates and silverware and cups, night glasses, things like that. Why can't that just be the norm, whatever kind of restaurant or cafe you go into? So I think it's also important to be aware of greenwash solutions. Something that's been more common that's happening is called chemical recycling, which is basically just incineration. We need to stay away from any kind of larger facilities that people want to burn things in. Usually, large corporations, are just looking to like keep burning our trash. When no, we shouldn't. We need to think about communal composting systems. We need to think about zero waste legislation. And plastics are toxic. We have more and more evidence that different plastics are harming our health, are harming our children's health. And they can only be recycled so many times. So why aren't we looking to other things like stainless steel and glass and other things to be reused? And why aren't we looking for ways to not produce the plastic in the first place? Because truthfully, the ones who are the most interested in producing the plastic are corporations who are making a lot of money off of that, because plastics are fossil fuels, and corporations are making lots of money off of that. So that's always going to be our biggest battle, because money is a big thing, for a lot of people. So I cannot emphasize enough, like reuse, reuse, reuse. That's what we want to shift towards for the sake of our future, for the sake of a livable planet. And we can all create zero waste communities, and really, like, we don't have time to not create zero waste communities. Like we know that the climate crisis is here. We're continuing to see really frightening natural disasters every year. We're continuing to see really extreme hurricanes that are continuing to destroy communities, wildfires, heat waves, other things that are really dangerous. And at the end of the day, those always affect people who are the most vulnerable around the world. So I would encourage you, I'm sure all of you are, because you're sustainability graduate students, you're probably already connected to different environmental organizations and efforts, but in case you're looking for some new ones to join, some great more national-based nonprofits I would encourage you to connect to are groups like Surfrider, Upstream, the Break Free from Plastic movement. These are all partners I work with now in my daily work, and I'm just learning so much. A lot of these organizations have communities you can join virtually or in person. The Break Free from Plastic movement alone is an organization of around more than 1,500 organizations around the world, of folks who are trying to reduce plastic and pollution around their communities. And right now you're on campus. Well, maybe some of you are still virtual. But there's things like single-use plastic bags, bans that could happen on campus. There's a reuse startup, maybe. I know startup culture is like a really big thing now. Have you ever thought about, some of you might be in the entrepreneurship track at Patel, thinking about what could you do to start a reuse business, especially where there's not anything yet, or maybe starting or joining a reusable coalition if there's one in your area. So these are some things that I think that people could do if they're wanting to think about, how can I be part of creating a zero waste community in a more tangible way? I think these are some great places to start. And these are some resources I can send out. I don't know if there's a way I can send out things afterwards, like email these links to folks who are watching today or those who couldn't make it. But these are some of the organizations I mentioned. The last link on this page, I'll explain really quickly because I didn't get a chance to elaborate on this much, but as we're thinking about innovative reuse businesses, this is one I've become connected to in Boston recently. It's been around for a few years. It's called the Useful Cup Collective. And so what they do is, so they have partnered with different cafes around Boston. They have reusable, like, stainless steel tumblers. So if you are getting coffee and on the go and you forgot your tumbler, you can get one of these tumblers at a cafe and then take it with you. And then they have collection points around the city where you can drop off your cup and they will pick it up and sanitize it and return it again to the cafe for use.
Next through it and
sorry. Hello. So that's, I think, something, these kind of like reuse businesses are popping up around the country, and I'm just really excited about that because it makes me it reminds me, like, yes, there are other solutions, and everything does not have to be single use and throw away, because as we know, nothing is ever really goes away when we throw it away. It has to end up somewhere. So we have to think about how are we going to reduce that, and there's just so many innovative ways to think about this more. So that's all I have for now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Did I stop sharing my screen?
Yes, you did.
Okay. So yeah, but I know that was a lot of information. So I would love to give any of you a chance to talk, or open it up for Q&A or anything, or if there's anything you wanted me to elaborate on.
First of all, bravo. And it's wonderful to hear that passion has grown and continues into the professional sphere. And I see you're drinking out of a glass. So, and a used mason jar that had a previous life before it was turned into something. So bravo for that. I have, of course, a lot of questions, but then I teach the Waste Not, Want Not, Repurposing Refuse as Resource class. So this is a vital issue for me. And I haven't taken out the garbage in 5 years. So because I don't believe in garbage. But that's I'm not as extreme as putting it in a little mason jar. I tend to shop like a normal person and then hang on to everything, clean it and sort it and prepare it so that I can find a way to use micro entrepreneurship to get my value back. But yeah, I haven't taken out the garbage in years. Keep it all. But I want to open it up to other people first, because you and I could probably talk all day. So others, this is your chance to talk to an alum and a professional in the field. What would you like to ask to Lauren? They're so shy here in Florida. They're not like up there in Boston. People are like, hey, I want to know about this. And what about that bottle law? Hey, Boston.
That is true.
I see George and Kelly have their hands raised. So let's go for George.
Hey, Lauren, quick question. So where you work right now in Boston, what exactly do you do? What are the functions, the key functions, I guess, of your position?
Sure. So I'm a policy analyst. So a key function of my work is helping to pass legislation at the state level related to recycling and waste. So meeting with legislators, analyzing policy, best practices. I've had to participate in public hearings when committees, when they're considering bills. Gather residents and other allies to testify in favor of legislation that we're trying to pass. I'm also doing a lot of research to help support the bills, just trying to gather things that would make a stronger case for legislators to understand how this is going to impact and benefit communities.
So is this at the state level or the city level?
Yes, it's at the state level. But I should clarify too, the Conservation Law Foundation works through all of New England. So we have offices in all 6 New England states.
Okay.
But I focus specifically on Massachusetts.
Thanks.
No, thank you.
Kelly, go on. You're on.
Oh, thank you. I was going to ask Lauren, how soon do you think some of this legislation could be passed? And then do you think is your goal to then have it adopted at the federal level?
So on the state level, I'm hoping that there's a couple bills we're working on that could be passed next year. So it is a long time. The legislative sessions in Massachusetts are 2 years long, so it's really long, drawn out processes. Something like the Break Free from Plastic Act, which is a federal bill. I don't know how, honestly, like, I think especially, with just so many different states to consider and so many different politics, I don't know how realistic something like that is ever going to pass. Or like, I've heard other experts say like things like the national bottle bill, they don't feel like hopeful about that, because there might be more pushback from different states than others. But I think certain pieces could be, I would be hopeful to see that, because I really think as the climate crisis worsens, like we really need legislation like this on a federal level.
We have a comment from a guest, Elizabeth, who writes, food waste is a huge contributor to methane in landfills. Can it be quantified so policymakers can be informed and motivated to support composting centers?
I believe so. If I know on the Environmental Protection Agency, they do have a lot of research about how much of our food waste ends up in landfills every year. So that's a good place to start. I don't know. I guess it would depend on like every state. I don't know if states really are like keeping track of how much food waste is ending up into their landfills, but I think it's definitely worth exploring to see, because I do think that that's an important, is like always bringing things like statistics and showing, showing legislators, like, do you see how much like is ending up in waste when this is, contributing to climate change, and you can easily bring it back out, and it's much more affordable to pay for a municipal composting system than to pay for all the, disasters we're going to continue to have with the climate crisis.
And Elizabeth writes, we need to measure so we can manage. Absolutely. And of course, you know that for me, the so-called food waste or organic residuals are the way that I get my fuel and fertilizer for cooking and heating water and for growing hydroponics. And so I'm very precious about that, and I'll never give it away. And we encourage students to bring any food residuals that they may have or scraps up to Rosebud Continuum, and we'll take them off your hands in a heartbeat. We know that New York and Massachusetts have implemented some laws saying that 100% by certain date of their organic residuals have to either go to composting facilities or biodigesters. Do you hear a lot up there about the new role of biodigestion and not just creating fertile soil out of these wonderful nutrients, but also creating clean renewable energy, or is that not yet on the legislative radar?
I haven't heard too much about the biodigesters. I do know that there are some different food waste bills being considered right now in Massachusetts. And I don't know if you were referring to the state legislation that just passed in Massachusetts earlier this year, their climate action bill. That was, I know, a really long time coming. So there might be a piece in there about food waste and reducing it by a certain, year. I do know on a local level there are some cities and towns in the Northeast that have banned food scraps from their garbage, from their like solid waste systems. And that's also like a good place to start. Although I know that like I said, I know bans are really hard, but they can happen. So with a group of committed residents, things can get past. So.
And if enough people attend our classes here and they pick up on this particular lifestyle, people will literally be competing. And Brooke, who just walked in, Brooke Hansen, who's the director of our sustainable tourism classes, and she has a class coming here. She and I, after each event at Patel, will have a little fun food fight over who gets the food scraps and the paper plates and paper cups and compostable forks and knives, because we're both using them for our gardens and for our energy. So it's growing. There's sort of like, at some point people can say, hey, I'm not giving you my banana peel, that's mine. And Tarek Royal asks in the chat, what's the secret then to never taking out the trash?
Wow, I mean, I think TH can answer that better than I can, because I have taken out my trash like individually. I haven't figured it all out yet. I try my best on a personal. I try my best to buy things as package free. I try to reuse as often as I can. Things like that. But I think really the way we're gonna get, we're not going to have to be able to take out our garbage is if we can get corporations to take responsibility for the waste they produce, and they have the resources and to change the way that they make packaging. Like, we could walk into every Target and Walmart in the country and find a refill reuse section. We could go and refill our soaps and our shampoos and other household items that we need, and we don't have to use single-use items. I think the more that we advocate for, sound legislation for things, I think that will take us to getting away from taking out our trash less often.
I totally agree with that. And of course, when you go to Aldi in Germany, where I'm going a week or so, and then off to Serbia, you find that Europe has implemented this legislation. When you go to Aldi, everybody unpackages their produce or their products, and they leave in these designated areas in the back of the Aldi supermarket. They leave their LDPE plastic and their HDPE plastic and their cardboard boxes and their wrappers, because the company is taking it then and sending it back to the manufacturer. And so Germans come with their cloth bags or other durable bags and bring their stuff home. And we're seeing a little bit more of that here in the States, but I think we've got to make it a culture. And you're right. We've pushed, as you said in your talk, we've pushed the individual to put us to shame too much instead of putting the burden back on those who are producing these. They have the facilities, they have the wealth to invest to turn the circular economy into reality. And then I think we would all do our part. And that might be the answer to Tarek's question, because not everybody's going to be as extreme as me waiting for that day and holding on to everything. But I have to say, Tarek, and to all of you, if you do hold on to your stuff, once your food waste has been turned into either biomethane at home with the home biogas system or into compost for your garden or a value at home, and you've cleaned everything else, it'll store indefinitely and it won't attract any problems, odors, or so-called vermin. So you can hang on to it. It's just about how big your garage is, I guess. Elizabeth asks, I'm from Manchester by the Sea, Massachusetts. There you are. And we just approved public and private money, 1.2 million, to build a composting center called Black Earth for several surrounding towns. Residents get great composted soil in return for their food scraps, which are picked up every week. So you see, it's happening. Leading lights like Elizabeth and others, and Brooke has just walked in. As I was saying, we fight over the food scraps here. We know how valuable they are. So yes, this is what we need. We need you, the presenters, faculty, staff, students, attendees, community members, to start making this the what they call in French the sine qua non, without which not, like the thing that is du jour. Like, why wouldn't you do it this way? Why not? It just makes sense. But right now we're as you say, we're in this thing where we've pitted people against one another instead of seeing the inherent value of all these materials. And that's why we've been looking at becoming a precious plastics hub, for example, saying, what do we do with the stuff that's already been manufactured out of fossil fuels? Let's continue doing great stuff out of it. We're not going to turn it into carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide and other and microplastics that contaminate. Let's hang on to everything and keep repurposing it. And ultimately, like, I just made a table out of some of the plastic waste that we have that's durable, that's going to last for decades. So there's that.
That's amazing. Oh, I have heard of Black Earth Compost. I know they're doing a lot of great things, and that's something too. I mean, for anyone here who's on the entrepreneurship track in Patel, you know, like, it's really amazing what compost companies are doing now, and it's not just happening in the Northeast, like where I was living before in Miami, like my old compost pickup service, like they were starting to partner with restaurants and other places, you know, and with the city in different ways, you know. So I'm like, this is happening, and this, you know, it doesn't even have to be a residential thing. It can expand to restaurants, because think about how much food waste restaurants are probably throwing away every day. There's just so much room for innovation, and there is money out there to do these things. You know, we can do it, and you know, make it accessible to more and more people.
Absolutely true, and amen to that. I think you're right. It is that entrepreneurial spirit and seeing the world through those nexus eyes, the systems thinking eyes that you've talked about, because it takes on a different, you can see a different future and a different outcome when you look at these materials as not trash. And I think one of the problems is that we used to talk about, you and I in classes, we have a garbage can in our minds that we think we have to fill because we have this noun called waste or garbage, when in fact waste should only be a verb or an adjective. And you'd say, well, that food has been wasted, that plastic has been wasted, but there's no such thing as waste as a noun. But when you have the noun in your head, you start filling it with stuff. So let's get rid of that. Other questions, people who are opening their minds to this subject and want to contribute or want to ask? Oh, Elizabeth writes, we call it gold. That's right. Black gold, the real black gold, not that oil stuff. That Black Earth is wonderful. And they say one man's or woman's trash is another man or woman's treasure. And there's age-old wisdom about this that many peoples around the world had observed, and we've just sort of fallen into a bad habit of thinking, I think. Anybody want to chime in with some thoughts or questions for Lauren? John Fernandez gave us a link to the story of plastic. Thank you very much for that, John. Yeah, that's a good one. I love the way that I noticed in many of our seminars now that the chat room becomes this incredible tete-a-tete, this incredible side conversation that we can save and pass on so that the great conversation continues with great offerings.
Yes, I wanted to highlight that. So I'm sure many of you, well, I know TH, you definitely are, because you had us read the story of stuff and Waste Not, Want Not, and in the course I took, one of the courses I took with you. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with Annie Leonard. You know, she's kind of a hero in the sustainability world. But so this is, you know, they have the story of stuff has, you know, a lot of different like documentaries and things. So these are great resources like you can show and educate people on, because they're very accessible. They break down these things, because you know, all of us who we study these things, like we tend to use a lot of jargon and forget that a lot of people outside of the sustainability world don't always understand what we're talking about when we use vocabulary like climate mitigation or, you know, all these other things. So I think the story of stuff and the story of plastic, they do a really good job of helping folks understand the crisis that we're in. So I wanted to highlight that because this tells the story of the Break Free for Plastic movement, and it's free on their YouTube channel for now. I think it's on the Discovery Channel YouTube channel. And I believe it's free at least through the end of November now. And I think they're also working on translating into 30 different languages as well. So that's like, you know, if you're vaccinated and getting together with people again, like this is a good way to like, you know, help your friends understand, like, this is what I'm doing. This is why I went back to graduate school in the middle of a pandemic. And this is why, you know, I bring my reusable water bottle everywhere because this matters. So this is a really good documentary. I would definitely recommend checking it out.
Lauren, do you feel that although you've graduated, that the graduate school experience is just still going on? Like you're still watching these videos and reading these books and these articles and papers, and you're still writing these proposals? And is it just like one now long stream of building your community of sustainabilitists, as Dr. Dorsey would call you?
Yes, I do feel that way. You know, you know, because I think, you know, when we're passionate about these things, like we naturally will, you know, read things in the news or find these documentaries, try to experiment in upcycling and other things. So yes, I do feel like it has continued in a lot of ways. And I often think about a lot of my graduate school experiences. Like it has helped me a lot in my daily work. You know, so even and some of my colleagues and my supervisors, they were really shocked that like some of the things I was already familiar with, they were like, oh, not everyone knows about, you know, not everyone's read Annie Leonard stuff, you know, not everyone has learned about X, Y, and Z system, you know. So it definitely was a big help, and, you know, helping me find work in sustainability.
Just pointing out, Brooke is about to teach a class here at 6, and so I don't know if you'd spent a lot of time with her. You were a little earlier, remember, Lauren? And so she's now working in Massachusetts doing sustainability coordination. So there's Brooke for you. And
yeah, sustainable tourism with Brooke.
Yeah.
I remember.
Oh, you did have to. Okay.
Yeah.
Together. We've just learned from Elizabeth, who's writing in the sidebar chat, that Manchester by the Sea just approved public and private money to build composting center called Black Earth in several surrounding towns. And I imagine that places like Manchester, and I was a diver when I was up in Massachusetts going to college, and used to go to, you know, up to Gloucester and up along the coast to go diving. These were incredible tourism locations that had to be spotlessly clean. And somewhere by the mid 80s, when I was in the Harvard Dive Club, we started running into plastic in the ocean. And it was disturbing, because all through the 70s and early 80s, as a scuba diver, I'd never run into that. And then you start seeing it getting to the point where now they say there'll be more plastic than fish in the sea by 2050, I guess is what the prediction was. So when we have that issue here in Florida with the coastline, if we're going to maintain tourism and celebrate the natural beauty of our heritage, that we've got to solve this problem. We're really delighted that you've gone on to make a career of this.
Well, I'm really thankful for my experiences at Patel and professors like you and Brooke, you know, who were really encouraging to me and, you know, helped me learn a lot. And, you know, I feel like, you know, I just opened my eyes to a lot of things in ways I had never seen before.
Well, and can you tell us, because Elizabeth just put in the chat now, derelict lobster traps and ropes too. And if any of you have seen the documentary Seaspiracy, you know that fishing line and fishing nets contribute probably the worst volumes of literally deadly plastics that are killing marine life, as well as despoiling the environment. Are you hearing much about what we can do on that line? Because that isn't the individual consumer, and it's not necessarily a manufacturer, that's maybe a bottling company or something. This is the tools of the trade. What is Massachusetts doing about getting the fishing industry to clean up its act?
Honestly, I don't know too much about that at all. I haven't heard too much about it. We do have, if you are ever interested, I mean, you can definitely check out the Conservation Law Foundation's website. We do have several different programs. So like I mentioned, I'm in the Zero Waste program, but we do have also a program that focuses on clean air and water. Right now, there's been more focus on protection over right whales. So that's like the most I'm hearing about right now with kind of sea life protection.
I shouldn't.
Thank you very much for that. And we still have about 3 minutes. If anybody else wants to come in with a question, it's a great opportunity, or make a comment. We love to build community here and bring everybody together from far and wide. Or if there's any final words that you'd like to say, Lauren, as you continue to fight the good fight. Oh, Kelly's got a question. Go ahead, Kelly.
Hi, Lauren. Hi, Lauren. I just wanted to thank you for accepting our invitation to speak today. I know it's been a journey and now you're in Boston, but we want you to feel like you're always family and join us for our Christmas dinner if you're in Florida.
Oh yeah, I did get that. I hope I can make it down somehow. I'll definitely think about it. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then TH, I did want to speak a little bit about our upcoming speakers that we have. So next week we have Susie Torriente. She is the Jacobs Engineering Global Resiliency and Climate Director. So we're looking forward to hearing from her next week. And following that, we have the Climate Action Project, one of our another alum out of Aspen, Colorado. And then we wrap it up with Alachua County Land Management. So that's the rest of our series. So thank you all, and thank you, TH, for moderating today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Kelly, for setting this great Sustainability Speakers series up. And we really appreciate you coming back to home to our little nest here and helping to hatch some more ideas among our student body, our faculty, and our community. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for having me today. Good luck with everything and your studies, and keep fighting the good fight.
Excellent.
All right. Have a good evening, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.